All right, we're good to go. That was the quickest setup I've had in a long time. I know I just mentioned that, but that's such a good sign. Um,
Very nice. Easeful, easy does it. That will be the theme of this talk. Easy does
right, right. Well, and it's interesting too because of all, I've only done 11 of these so far. So I'm still early, but I probably know less about you than anyone else I've talked to.
it. Yay.
So I kind of like have some general things, but aside from that, we're just gonna wing it, I think. And uh, also, you're probably the quickest person I reached out to because I heard the song "Home"
Mm-hmm.
and then was like immediately reached out. I think I saw someone shared it, maybe the guy from Gone Gone Beyond.
Oh, Danny, yeah.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, he's one of
Yeah,
my dear, dear friends,
right.
who actually was a beautiful ear on this whole record for me. And is one of my dear musical mentors and dear friends. So,
Right. That's
um,
awesome. Yeah, and I heard it and then like I think I almost immediately reached out because I was
oh,
like this is
hey,
just right for sure. So I kind of
fantastic.
what's that?
Fantastic. And
Right.
this is, so you've done 11 of these. I've done zero. This is my first one. I just threw it out to the universe. I was like, I think I'm ready to start talking. Like I
Yeah.
haven't, I've always been a performer. I've always like very, put the things together how I want to share them with
Mhm.
people. And I've been really being nudged by spirit, the inner voice, whatever one wants to call it,
Mhm.
that it's time to begin speaking and telling the story and just sharing collective level, because I think
Right.
there's many of us that are not having normative human experiences as we have learned them. And
Mm.
there can be a lot of fear in really coming out and speaking to that. And so I know for myself and many others, I've been in major hiding, major veiling, major. So today is the first day that I'm it all aligned, and I just said I'm open to the invitation, and you
Right.
were the first to reach out to that prayer to the universe, and here we are. So yeah,
That's so good too, and I'm a little excited about that too because I think most of the people I've had have been on other shows, and I'm like, all right, cool, this is the first, so that's exciting for me too.
fun.
Um, and and you mentioned kind of your journey almost to the point now where you want to talk, but obviously you had to get to the point where you were even able to kind of listen closely enough to capture these feelings and put them into art at all. So
Mhm.
I wonder if you could kind of just give us a little background on like your journey just into your own creative space or listening to whatever it is that wants to come through you.
Absolutely. Hold on one sec. Let me get this. Get this on the full screen. Or not. We're going to be on a smaller screen.
Okay.
Not the fastest at figuring, listening to the technological
Oh, right.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, the journey of getting to listening to that inner voice really closely, which is obviously a big one and many years in the making. But I would say, it kind of brings me to how I would actually describe myself, which has been a big question for me in my life. Like, I've done a lot of things. I've been a performer in a lot of different settings. So I've been an actress, I've been a songwriter, I've been in the circus was where I started, and all these different performance things. And then my life took this whole other spiritual opening after I had my first experience with source, with my own God self. And that took me on a different path into the exploration of sound on a whole different level, and healing and becoming a healer, and a ceremonialist, and traveling the world and following my own heart's knowing of how I'm here to serve, which was a very big, took a lot of listening, because it was not at any way what my mind thought I was here to do. And so Much of my life was knowing I had this passion for performing, but not knowing really how my soul wanted to express within that. And so I went about it in a really traditional way at first. Like, I got to go to acting school, I got to go to Hollywood, I got to audition 3 times a day and
Mm-hmm.
receive enough rejection for thousands of lifetimes, and go about it in this way, which we all are going about in our own kind of way of how we're being told we need to follow our heart. And so we might kind of have some idea or some inkling of like, I'm into this, or I love doing this thing, but then we try to fit it in the boxes of what society tells us we're supposed to do with that
Mm.
gift or that talent. And so there was a journey of losing myself to find myself, of
Right.
course, as we all need to. So I went on a journey of forgetting,
Mm.
and then I went on a journey of remembering. And where that has led me is to the essence that I am a muse. And that what actually connected all of these things, and none of them were wrong. It was just whether I was trying to fit myself in this shoe or not. What like connected everything was that my gift is to become empty,
Mm.
is to become a vessel for whatever wants to move through me. And that was always, I couldn't have described it as it, but ever since I was a little kid and the first time I performed, that was what happened. It was like I got out of the way, and it was the most ecstatic thing ever to open myself up to such a bigger energy that was so transcended my personal experience. So I guess the love of that and following the
Right.
love of that is really what led me to learning to listen, and more than anything learning to move out of the way so that I can be an instrument,
Right.
be an instrument for something else to play. And so um it's that art that also leads me to bring it back to what you were asking, but like that
Uh-huh.
art is what also leads me to listening and trusting that knowing.
Mm.
Like, it's been a path of also trusting that I know, and it's because my body knows.
Right.
All of our bodies knows. Like, this is
Mm.
the feminine way. This is what we have forgotten is this other intelligence, which is rather than God outside of oneself, God within oneself, that there is this all knowing spark within us that we can listen to.
Right. Yeah. And there, I mean, you said so much there that is so good. But what I really like is the emptying of yourself. When we say self, we don't mean your capital S self, but your personality traits and characteristics and all the things that you swore were you that
Mhm.
are first of all very fun to play in. Don't give up your
Yeah.
interests or anything. But what I've found in art made from the place that you're speaking is it creates this very clear mirror for me to see stuff that's in me, right? So like
Mm,
there's clear truth that when you're doing it from a place as as cleanly as you can. Obviously we're not all crystal clear, that's for sure. There's plenty bubbling under the surface, but I can hear that in your music, and and I've only heard 2 songs, so that's like what's shocking about it. But and I there's so many things that you said, but I wonder if you could, when it comes to listening and it comes
mhm,
to emptying of maybe the stuff that's of no longer use to you, like maybe we'll
mhm,
put it that way, because I don't want to scare anyone away where I'm like, you to let go of yourself. That's kind of a hard thing to
mhm,
say while you're in it. You know what I'm saying? That So I feel like, is there any practices that really helped you kind of continue to empty and become more clear?
mhm. Absolutely. Sound.
Mm, So
that's
just
really how I found myself here. Because I was always a songwriter, but then I had an early experience through sound where I I experienced sound as God, as everything.
mm,
Everything, everyone is
right.
everything, right?
Right, right,
And
right.
so got into that field of vibration. And so for me, the quickest path, and I went on this journey of following that thread through all kinds of cultures and really finding it as a unifying thing that brought together all of these belief systems is
Mm,
every single one of them acknowledges sound in some way. And so I am of the thought that sound vibration is the first thing of creation. It's the
right,
and therefore it is the very thing that can guide us all the way back home,
right.
which nothing else can entirely do except for vibration. Um, as a byproduct of it being the first thing that we have to follow that back. And so especially so as far as practices go, and what I started innately self-remembering was all these practices of toning and humming with myself, that actually led to this first initial remembering and awakening experience. Was I was going through a really deep grief process, and my body just kind of took over and started directing me on what to do, and a lot of that had to do with sound and using my own voice to heal my trauma, to heal my nervous system, to heal all those things that get in, that begin obstructing our divine innocence or our essence that was there right at the beginning. Is like we were born totally open. We are a complete open vessel and muse from the creator from the moment we're born. And then life happens.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the conditioning and all of the traumas in whatever ways that happen for everybody in their individual path, and nobody is without that. So that's what begins to make the ego construct of what we are, which, as you very aptly said, is not a negative thing. It's not something we want to get rid of. This is a big misconception, I think, in spiritual, um, a lot of spiritual traditions, is like the ego is not a negative, but it's something that we can direct. And it got created unconsciously by our environment. But as adults, we have the opportunity to rewire ourselves and then build a construct, an ego construct that serves us rather than was, pushed upon us. And part of that process is first emptying. And
Mm-hmm.
that means like emptying through the trauma in our systems. And from everything that I've learned, from everything that I've researched, from everything that I've experienced with people that I've worked with, one of the fastest ways there is through your vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to regulate the vagus nerve is humming.
Mm,
Very, very simple humming. It creates the most internal vibration. And it's something that we naturally do to children. You have, did I see you have some daughters, right?
nieces actually.
Nieces. Oh, okay. So, but
Yeah.
you've been around some kids. But if they're
Right.
little, if you've been around a young
Mm-hmm.
child, whether you're a parent or not,
Mm-hmm.
you know to hum to the children when they're
Mm-hmm.
going through a stressful time. That's like a natural impulse of us to help regulate their nervous system. And yet we don't tend to do that for ourselves. And so that's one of the first practices I always
Mm,
give to people. And it's people that really do it have incredibly powerful results of moving trauma that they've been trying to heal for lifetimes in talk therapy. And yet, if you get right to the source of where it lives and use your own voice, which is actually the most powerful healing tool that you have available to you, it's your soul imprint in vibration captured, it's everything. And so you can use that medicine to help to empty out those traumas and empty out those stories. And the more I've done that, the more and more empty I
mm-hmm.
have become to receive
Right.
other things.
And what I like there's like a really basic but overlooked concept, which you just mentioned, which is the thing that you would inherently do for a child who is feeling big emotions, whether it's fear or whatever the thing is, the things that you would naturally do, pick them up and hold them, hum,
Mhm.
all the things like that, we don't do to ourselves at all. But we're still feeling those same big emotions we felt when we were 3 years
Exactly.
old. And just because we're a few decades later, we still feel these feelings, but then we act like we should just think them away. Like we can
Mhm.
rationalize them away,
Yeah.
as opposed to, like you just said, and I've never tried anything with my own sounds and humming. I mean, I've used
Mm.
like chanting, and like I've learned a little bit of kirtan, which was, I've noticed, helped, deepen my meditations and whatnot. And now that I'm hearing you, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Why after a little bit of chanting, all of a sudden I sink a little bit deeper
Mhm.
into just that stillness that you try to hit with meditation. So it's a really good reminder, I think, that that thing that you would do to comfort a child, like you can still do. I don't care if it's just swaddling yourself in your blankets for a minute,
Mhm.
or like you said, humming. I just think that's such a good thing, that self-parenting is not only like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this, but it's also the comforting aspect
And
of
I
that.
think that we need more of that comforting aspect more than anything, because what we have lost culturally is this, and much of my art to get around to that is inspired from the lost wisdoms of the goddess, of the
Mhm.
feminine aspect or face of creator. And that is all of these kinds of medicines. And so I think they're where we're the most depleted.
Mhm.
It's like nourishing the nervous system, nurturing, caring, patience, compassion. And that journey of reconnecting with the mother source, it begins with us. It
Right.
really begins with self mothering,
Mm.
giving and honoring yourself the way that a mother would. And that was one of the most beautiful initiations I received from Divine Mother Presence, was to be guided. Because I had been in my life, it was easy for me to be very devotional and revere that which was outside of me. And I had been traveling around in this path of seeking, and I was in such a space of devotion. And in this one really beautiful cosmic moment, many things lined up for it to unfold and happen. But I had this beautiful initiation with the mother, in which she said, now, the way that you, I mean, these things don't come in words, they're
Mm.
feelings,
Yeah.
sensation, knowings. But in essence, the transmission was, the way that you have revered me, the way that you revere this tree. I had been praying to this tree, and the way that you have revered these things, now turn within and revere yourself
Mm.
as you have loved these things. And this, in one instant, I bowed to my own heart, and it was the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, where I got to witness the God spark within myself that
Mhm.
is the God spark within everything.
Right.
And you can only really know how it is everything when you have found it within yourself, when you have bowed to that divinity that
Mhm.
you are. And this is what I believe the feminine principle wants for us, is to really witness our own beauty, our own hearts, our own divinity, um, and love that and revere that. And for me, there just so much healing has come out of loving myself as a pure divine mother would love
Mm.
me.
Right.
And so I invite all beings on that journey, and like that question, that questioning and that inquiry of and we don't always get the mother that does that for us either, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes not. And um, but we can do that for
Right.
ourselves
Right.
in our adult life.
Right. And it's there's so much there. And as much as I mean, I'm I'm very drawn to the mother aspect. I found myself very much drawn to the Kali symbol as one that's like
Mm.
uh consistent theme in my current and recent experience. But also there's practical elements here. Like even when you were just, it's not even as fun to talk about the practical side. Like it's like I
I think
love hearing
practical is super fun
like
because
well like
it's here.
I
We're here.
okay, good. Well then I won't hold back on it. But as you were talking about, praying to the tree and then getting the the message of the reverence that you have for the mother and the nature towards yourself and seeing it internally, there's a practical element there. Like, and that goes back to what I said before about what you do for a kid, but a lot of times we do things for other people that we don't do for ourselves, and it's so simple. I remember, and this doesn't sound as heart opening and amazing as the stories you just told, but I remember one time I realized that because I had gone through a breakup, and I remember with this person, I would, if I stayed at her house, I would make sure that, if she went to work, I would get everything clean, make her bed really nice, and do it. So when she came home, she'd come home to like a clean space, right? And then after the relationship, I was like, wait, I could do that for me. Like, because I was like, oh, wait, like I can do that for, me who comes home late. I can create so that thing that we always so easily, the devotion, the reverence, the practices that we might do for someone else, I'm going to put them first. I'm going to do this. I mean, you can also do for yourself. And I know that this might not land with everybody, but there are people who are, not turning it inward, and these little practical ways may lead to a bigger understanding, which is what you've seen. And again, with what you were saying too, it's like you don't have to have this huge transmission right away. You might just notice an ember of divinity in you. You might just notice like this little, like you can start, like Ram Dass, I think, said, we can wave the embers, and then the fire can start, because it's not always, it might just be a little bit of curiosity. I'll be like, oh, you know what? I do kind
Mhm.
of feel something. And then just keep at that. Which reminds me, like what you said when we're born.
Mm.
This was a thing that really, really got my curiosity about who I was really going. Is I remember thinking about like when I was born, before I knew I was Sean, before I knew I was in the middle of America, before I knew all that stuff, I was something.
Mhm.
And that thing is still there. Like that little bit of essence, that little bit of like existing is still there behind all these stories and all these experiences
Mm.
and all this stuff. And it's like the screen that the movie is projected on has always been the same, right? Like the screen is there. It's just this white, perfectly clean screen, and then we're just
Mhm.
shining stuff on it all the time. But that screen is still the screen. And you can,
Beautiful metaphor. Like
yeah.
that.
Oh, I got it somewhere. I probably it's not mine.
Yeah.
I won't claim it, but it's so good, and it just reminds me like of all the things you're saying, and I just like
Mhm.
to those little thoughts that can make us think, oh, maybe I'm not beholden to all the stories that I've told about myself and all the experiences I've had. And there are ways to kind of heal. It is pretty, just knowing that, is pretty cool.
Mhm.
But and I just had to ramble about all the stuff you said, but uh,
Yeah, I love the idea. And also, like, we are in control of writing new stories, not in that we change the aspects of our life. This can be very misunderstood. Um, because what is,
mm,
and but how we write what is in our story, how we interpret that is totally a matter of the lens that we take, is what I've noticed, because in times in my life where I had very different lenses, this, if something happened to me, I was writing it as this in my life, or this terrible thing. Now I have a very different lens. Now when something comes my way that could very much be the same thing that could have come to me before, now I'm seeing it as part of a bigger story, and I write them into these mythologies. And I really, because I'm a storyteller, maybe I have this love of creating the most epic story of my life in my head. It's like, if I'm going to be here and do this, I'm going to make it some crazy mythological story that goes
Right.
way back and way into. And I don't attach to it so much as that it's all literal, because I think we're weavers and we're creators in this way. And so, uh, I always invite people to loosen up with this idea of the life that we're leading, and know that in any moment you can try on different lenses and play a little bit with those same experiences, but build them into something different. It's like, it's the same Lego blocks. We all got this stuff that life hands
Right.
us. It's like, it's not always so fun, but what are you going to build out of it? What is it doing for you? What is it? Um, because nothing is for nothing.
Right.
It's all impacting you in some way. And negative impacts are one of the best ways that we learn and grow.
Right.
So to me, I start to put it together and build these bigger arcs and myths of, oh, and then when something happens, I'm like, oh, well, that's connecting into this story of what I'm healing from over here. And I begin to become the storyteller. And I think that this is a very, very good practice in general. Uh, I carry a shamanic lineage, which is a new shamanic lineage called the Pachacuti Mesa lineage, that's rooted in Peruvian wisdom, but it was intended by those lineage keepers to be brought to the West at this time, because these roots are very old. How to live and engage with the earth in ways of reciprocity, in which there's a communication and a give and a take, is something that's very old to all of our cultures, actually, but we've mostly lost that, especially in European lineages. So there's some cultures that have retained some of that wisdom of how to be communicating. How's I say? I got down a loophole, but
Yeah.
in
That's
essence, I guess the Pachacuti wanted to pop out in some way.
right.
So,
Right. Right.
uh, but these, I guess, to tie it back into mythology is, I'm always interacting with life in a ceremonial way, and thus it allows me to build these bigger mythologies and zoom out. Oh, that's where it was. Is so in shamanic wisdom is that one of the first things you ask if somebody comes to you is, when is the last time you told your story? Somebody is out of health, if they're experiencing difficulty in their life, this question, when is the last time you told your story? And to me, why that's there and why that's such an important question is because the more we tell our story, the more we become the storyteller
Hmm.
rather than the character within it. And so when we begin to tell our life stories, and this is an inspiration of me saying, hey, to the universe, I'm ready to speak more, I'm ready to tell more, I'm ready to share more, because it heals us and it heals others, because our stories are all the same story,
Hmm.
actually, which is beautiful, because there's an infinite spectrum rainbow of that story, but it's one human story. And so,
Yeah. I mean, that's that's absolutely true. And that idea about um creating your own personal mythology, and then I think culturally, in Western culture at least, that I've experienced, if you can't logically explain it, then it's not of value. And so sometimes even, I'll go through periods where there's just insane synchronicities that are leading me to certain things that are just like absolutely wild, that seem like pure magic. Like, it just
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. And I'm so excited about them, and I'm so excited to share them. And then I start thinking, oh, well, you're just, that's silly. And, your friends are going to mock you for it. And then I'll think, you know what? Like, I'm only here for a limited time. Like, if I can live in like the magic place or I can live in the logical, like I get to pick. Well, if I get to pick,
Mhm.
I may as well just live in the magical place.
Exactly.
It's so much more fun. Like I may as well. Now, I don't get me wrong, there I still swing the other way because there's a lot of conditioning that I have to, I have to unravel still that tells me, well, you shouldn't think like this or you shouldn't, whatever. I,
Mhm.
I actually had a conversation once with uh Swami in California at a Kali temple, and I told him I was excited about these synchronicities and these things. And I said, I know and I had read some Buddhist stuff too,
Mhm.
that had kind of, you know, it said, these exciting like synchronicities are just another thing to let go of, and I didn't feel really right about that. I was just like, but I'm so excited about them. And I told him, and then I kind of downplayed them and I said, well, you know what? I know I'm romanticizing this. I know I'm over romanticizing these stories. And he's like, yeah, as you should. It's a romance. You're having a
Yeah.
romance with like the divine, with whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
He's like, yeah, it's romantic. Of course you should do that. And it made me realize that again, I had that choice of like, um, just I could go down the path where I'm like, it's just another thing to let go of. And I do see the value in that. Don't get me wrong. I see the value of softer attachment, not no attachment, but like a softer attachment. Um, I get that. But at the same time, if the world feels magic for a second, that's awesome. Like just feel
Yeah.
that. And like, I don't have to downplay it. And that's kind of what you were saying just reminded me of that.
Mm-hmm. So much of what you said I love so much, and um I'm a big believer in magic.
Mm,
A big believer in the same thing that you said of if I can choose a life of magic or not, why not go with the magic?
mhm.
Why not perceive this reality as magical? And there is a romanticism in it, and it's everything. It's also your creation. It's your art. It's um, there, even as an artist, like I don't see my art as my art. I am my art. What I
Mm,
am creating and building and remembering is my art, and then everything that comes through that or from that is like the fruit of that tree,
mm.
um of that flowering. And so I think it's beautiful to have why wouldn't we want to have a romance in life? We're here,
Right,
and I believe we want to be here. I believe we're here
right.
because we want to be here. And I'm somebody who's gone through all of the heartbreak and all of the longing and all of that feeling of I don't want to be here. I want to go home, which is
Mhm.
where this song that you found me is very much, and that song came from a moment when I was so lost. I was in the depths of being disconnected from my soul essence. And um, I just felt done. I felt like I was just at one of those moments, which are the most potent for transformation, right? It's like when you have just hit your rock bottom and it feels like, where even is my spark? Then moments of grace come in. If you want to, if it's your heart's call to change and to move out of that, it's like the prayer will be answered in some way. And for me, that came from this star. Of all places, there was this star. I was having this night of feeling so um distraught, and I actually was going through a whole death and rebirth. I was letting go of who I had been as an actress. My name had been Red Wheeler, and I went into the night and I said, um, and I was having a ceremony with my friends, a plant medicine ceremony and so they had asked like, "What's the theme of the night?" And I said, I want Red Wheeler. I'm letting Red Wheeler go." in that night, it involved, in my ceremony, it was just a lot of shedding and a lot of grieving and a lot of that loss. And then there was this intelligence that I just looked up to the stars, and there was this transmission or this intelligence that was there that let me know I was always home, that
Mm.
where I come from, I will always return to. It was the, just this feeling that I got given in this moment of grace of, oh, I'm here and I want to be here. And I'm also always home and I will be going home. And there is no separation between the future and now and the past and now and everything. So in that sense, we are always there. And then that same star later transmitted to me that song.
Mm.
Um, as my friend asked me, well, if Red Wheeler is going, then who's being born? And I looked up and that star just said Lady Moo. And I had no idea where that was leading me.
Mm.
Lady Moo. And then this song, the chorus of Home came through. I just started singing it to them. And there's something in that melody that always, and I've gotten to witness it over and over again. And for many years, I just sing it in ceremonies. I just sing it in these very sacred places, and for myself and for the earth, And but every time I shared it, it had that transmission for people. It had this capacity to bring people back to that place within them that is eternally home, that is held um, in the womb of the mother, is one,
Mm.
in the arms of the mother, which is the void from which we all emerge from. And so uh, it's truly that song that got me out of my insecurity and into, I'm going to make my art, because it took a big leap and it took
Right.
a big jump for me to come into this stuff, because I had so much trauma around rejection and not being good enough and perfectionism and hyper uh, and I just thought, I don't know if I'll ever get to the other side of this. It just feels so overwhelming. um, but at a certain point, I saw the impact that the songs had, and I knew I had a responsibility. It was
Mm.
like, it's not mine, it's not me. And this is the way that ego can very much show up for those of us. That ego either comes in that overly confident kind of form, but it also is for many of us, like healers and light workers and out there, it's like we've got this insecurity ego that is equally destructive, that is equally not serving us, to be like, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I can't share myself. And it was like, and I just kept being shown by, thank goodness I have, these beautiful guides that continue to kind of get me back on my path. But it had to really be shown that it was selfish for me to not step in and share that, so that more people can, like yourself,
Mhm.
can receive it
Right.
and have that feeling of home.
Right. Well, what's really interesting to me, and like you said, as different people receive this, and like I said near the beginning, that through clearer mirrors we can reflect these truths that are inside of us. And what's really interesting to me, and I'm just gonna share another little story, is whenever I would get like really low, like really just depressed, and I couldn't even articulate. Like I would get to a point, I remember many times driving and just getting to a point, whatever triggered the trauma is irrelevant, but I would get to a point where I would be so upset I couldn't even think about the details of the issues anymore. But what would literally come out of my mouth was, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And I would just repeat it over and over. And I knew that wasn't my house. I knew that it wasn't like,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a place, that it wasn't anything. I was just like, I just want to go home. And like, it was such a, like you said, like those moments are very potent for accessing some level of truth in yourself, and maybe making some transformation. And so I would say that. And what's so interesting to me about just how the world works is that, I mean, I know you what 40 minutes better than I did before, but essentially like we don't know each other. We're in different parts of the world. And as you were working through your stuff, and finding a way to that star to tell you all this stuff so you could find this melody, I, was driving around somewhere saying, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And like, it's just the fact that these things come up, and then we find our way to this song even, and I sat and watched the video. I told you this with my mom, and we both just like wept. Like it's just such a, which is not a thing that like I do. I mean, I was teary. I was trying to hold back because I'm just still, I'm not that comfortable. And I was like, I don't know. But then I knew in my head, I was like, this is a moment. This is a thing. Like, and this
Oh,
is
and how
because there's
beautiful with your mother. Like, this is
right.
why I create, that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Right.
It's
And
one
and
of those, and I'm, you know, happy, right? It's like that's,
right. And it's one of those things, but it's like the truth that you found in yourself. And like we say, like as you say, the star, intelligence, whatever, someone might hear that and again say, well, that feels weird. It's like, well, don't forget what we said earlier, that it is just kind of igniting this thing that's in you. Like it's
Mhm.
the same thing that's in you. So all it did was kind of wipe this clean so you could see the thing that was in you already. So just it's so good. And I do want, because I feel like we could just go on forever, and that's fine. But I will say that I do want to kind of get into the video a little bit.
Yeah.
I typically would say, I let these things kind of go where they want, but I feel like it would be a travesty if we didn't talk a little bit about the video and the sim and this, because I'm more of an audio, like I don't watch a lot of music videos anymore. I
Hmm.
did in 1992 on MTV and watching, winger videos, but now
Mm.
I don't as much. And I remember I hadn't watched the video, and that's when I put it on at my mom's for the first time. I was like, "Oh, let's watch this. This interview's coming up. I'll check out the video." But the song is what is matters. The song is what got me. The video will be fine. You'll be singing and whatever. And then the video, oh my God, the video floored me. Like I just watched it before we talked and I teared up
Mm.
again. Like
Mm.
it's not possible. So I'd like just maybe talk a little bit about the video for whatever comes to you in terms
Yeah,
of talking about anything regarding it.
absolutely. Um, Thank you for steering us to the art and the reason that we're here. Because I can go into some cosmic
Mhm.
realms eternally. There's so
Right,
much we
right,
could talk about.
right.
Yeah, so well, what's interesting is when these came through, and I have many songs, but this came through, and what I'll share with our audience because they don't really know where we're coming into. But
Hmm.
this is a 3-song and 3-video series called She. And so when I was ready to step into my art, it was because a very clear project came through in my mind that I was being asked to bring into the world. And so it was these 3 songs that I had carried for some years that I understood as channeling. So I also write songs, but there's a difference when I write a song and I know I'm kind of writing it from my mind, and when I open and something comes through all in one shot that I can't really claim ownership in that way, except doing the work to get out of the way, which is what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had these 3 songs, and I knew that they represented the energies of the 3 archetypes of the divine feminine. So, this feminine principle. And so it was the maiden, the mother, and the wise woman. And as that became clear, I knew right away that these were not just songs. That these were going to be stories, and that they were going to be visually represented. And for me, this was also on a personal level, because I think it's important to always make art for both the personal, because that serves the transpersonal in a way. This was a project that was merging all of my art forms. So, as I mentioned a little bit before, is like I began in the circus. I was very into musical theater.
Hmm.
for much of my life, and that was my first dream until I didn't get into the musical theater school at NYU. So I ended up going to a straight acting studio at NYU and began studying acting very seriously, and then took onto a path and moved to Hollywood and was more in film and TV. Then went off, had my awakening, went off in a completely different direction, aka to bring us back to the same
Hmm.
place through exploring sound, sound healing and becoming a healer and a ceremonialist. And so this project is the culmination of all of those things in one. It's really me approaching the creation as a healer and as a ceremonialist, as a ritualist. And so every part of these videos has a lot of intention in it and has a lot of ceremony involved in it. So in the whole process of making, there was prayers being sent out, to call in the right dancers to embody these archetypes. So all and I live my life in a very magical way, as you
Hmm.
do. And so there was infinite synchronicities of how each person and each thing lined up to bring together these stories and these transmissions. And I had my ideas in my head, but things unfolded in their own unique way. And so one story I will tell, because it has to do with this story initially, is so this video that we're talking about is exploring the divine mother archetype, and it's a song called Home. We talked about where that came from. And so as I was sitting these videos and the stories, there was an initiation that wanted to be told with each story. So the initiation of the mother, as it came to me, was the initiation of the wounded inner child. And so I knew I wanted this piece, this dance piece, to be between a mother and child. And so um, that was what I knew going into it. And I had a general idea. I had an idea of this story of them kind of, the child being upset and then them kind of breaking apart and being able to come back together. Then in the filming of it, in the actual filming of it, there was magic that happened, unexpected things. And so the way that I had as a director thought of it, it was that I thought, they'll kind of go through this whole break, they'll have a separation, the mother will go through her own process of re-embodying herself, and then she will come and approach the child, and invite the child back in together. So we had filmed this entirely, that form of the story. And and we had wrapped the little girl, because we had this amazing little girl, 3.5-year-old Ayana, little superstar. It was the best day of her life. She loved it. It was my first day of directing. So this was
Hmm.
like, and directing a kid is normally a very challenging thing, but this was amazing. She was like
Hmm.
a little rock star. She knew
Yeah.
she wanted to know her, all of her places and how, and she was just rehearsing it. I'd never asked her to do anything. She was just like nonstop rehearsing it. I would
Wow.
tell her something and she'd be like, okay. And so universe just always brings the perfect, the perfect people, the perfect, the perfect thing. So she had done her job. We had cut her. We were like, okay, Ayana, amazing job. We'll cut you. And she was off running around and playing. And we were filming the mother, Ashtara, um, in her dance sequence and in her embodiment sequence. And through the song, Ashtara is just beautiful muse herself. Beautiful priestess and very gifted in the art of embodiment and opening and being a channel through the form for that transmission. So she was really allowing herself to have this initiation of the mother, which was very deep and personal for her, and she still speaks about it. And in that we got to capture this beautiful initiation that she was moving through in her own body. And in that journey, she was brought to tears, to true tears, and was genuinely just going on that journey of the song. And we captured it. And while this was happening, totally unbeknownst to us, little Ayana, she comes all the way down through the land. She was running around with the dog. She takes off. She had put on this this little cape that she was running around in,
Hmm.
but wasn't actually in the film. She takes it off and gets back up on her place on the rock, we're not saying anything. And I literally, and I'm with the cinematographer, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's back there. I said, Lucas, go,
Hmm.
capture, capture. She's back in the spot. And then she comes down herself and comes up to Ashtara, who's crying. And she was so concerned for Ashtara because she had been with her all day. They're not actual mother and daughter, which you would never believe because they were so, there's energy. But they had just met that day. And she comes up to Ashtara and she just gives her her hand. And I mean, we're all just like losing it,
Yeah.
like watching it. We're just like, wow, like to really witness, truly capture the magic of that transmission, which is like the child is healed. And like, I wouldn't have even thought of that in my brain of the child being the one to come up and offer
Yeah.
that reciprocity and that love back to the mother. So it was, yeah.
Wow. And it feels like it almost feels I don't want to just say validating, but it feels like the story you were trying to tell turned into it almost feels like, oh yeah, everything that you're doing here, this is real. This is a real story. It's like you went there to shoot something that resembled the story that you heard, but then the universe is like, no, we're doing the real thing right now. The real story.
Yeah.
Like this is really gonna happen in
This is
every
really going to happen.
yeah,
The
like
initiation will
right.
occur for sure.
Right. Like
And
that
it's
is
not, that's where that listening comes in, because if I'm too
mm,
stuck in this idea of how the story wants to be told, I'm going to miss the real story that's already there,
wow.
So,
I'm so glad you told that story. That is so so good. So good.
um,
I love that so much. I'm glad that you got to experience that too, or that you were there for
uh,
it. Like
and
that's
it was just one of those moments where I also, because I went into that day very nervous. I had never directed before. And
mm,
like, I'm taking on so much. I took on a lot in these videos that I had never done before, including editing them, which I never thought in a million years I was going to edit these
mhm,
videos.
right.
So, I was in this moment of doubt as well. And so it was this reaffirmation of the universe of like, you don't need to worry. All you need to do is surrender and to listen and do what you do best, because everything is going to happen as it's meant to happen. And I knew I was in the hands of the mother at that point. That was my
Mm,
first day of filming. And I knew that we were supported. I knew I was in the hands of the mother. And I knew that the magic, and when we do commune with the universe in that way, we're open to hear that, we're open to receive that support, that magic
mm,
that is, I believe, readily available to us. We just often don't choose to partake in it. So
wow.
it was a
That
beautiful one. It was very reaffirming for me on a personal level to get to witness that
right.
and be like,
That's
okay,
amazing.
yeah, I get it. Taught me like day one,
Yeah.
like this is how you direct, like learn,
Right.
like listen,
Yeah. Right.
surrender.
Listen. I mean, that's just such a good lesson. And so we're coming up in on the hour, and in weird rare form I do have another interview in 20
Mm-hmm.
minutes or so, but I have to finish with these last two questions because I ask everybody the same two questions,
Great.
and one of them I think I mentioned, but we'll get to that in a second. First, I started this because I like to share stuff that hits me, and
Mm-hmm.
yes, just like this music. I was like, okay, my goal today is one to just hear you and like get to talk to you, and but also just maybe if 50 more people can hear the song or whatever. I don't know, but I that was the goal. And so my question then is, if you could share something like a suggestion, it could be a book, it could be a practice, it could be a song, it could be something not even super deep. It can be like, oh yeah, you should try this new show, anything, because we all
Mm-hmm.
like to share. Would you have a
Mm-hmm.
suggestion for people, like just anything at all?
Mm. Lately, I've been really into the simplicity and the importance of gratitude,
Hmm.
because I'm a big believer in mindset and perspective, and like we're saying, and so I've been doing one lately, which is just a 9 breath gratitude practice. Because this is the shortest and easiest way to get our lens to see the world for the magic that it's providing, I believe, rather than the difficulty. And both are always there.
Mm.
So it's 9 deep breaths into the belly and breathing all the way down into the base of the spine, all the way into the belly, to really ground yourself, and invite your presence into the physical vessel. And the first 3 breaths, on the inhale, you just say, I am grateful. And then the first thing that pops into your mind on the exhale, you just state that. So, not going into it with a pre idea of what you're grateful for, but just allow it to naturally arise. And I've been breaking it into 3 sections. So, 3 breaths is what I'm grateful for. Um, in my present environment, because that's the first thing that's easiest to just kind of tap onto, of like, oh, I'm grateful for this comfy pillow beneath me. I'm grateful. It's like just finding 3 things in your current environment, then finding 3 things that you are grateful for in your current life, in your circumstances. And then 3 things finally that you're grateful for within yourself. And I
Mm.
leave that one for last because it's kind of, getting us, prepared to, because that can be difficult for us to actually really honor ourselves and what we're grateful for within ourselves. So that's a simple little practice. And, to sum up what I feel like the themes of what wanted to come through today for whoever's
Mm.
seeing, because you never really know what's going to
Right.
come through. I think it really feels like that mothering thing was really center, and we are talking about the mother piece, and that's what brought me here. So really taking with you as an inquiry, how can I be a better mother to myself?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the qualities that the ultimate mother, and it might not be our mothers, but how we would want to be loved and held, the level of compassion, the level of forgiveness, level of understanding that an ideal mother would provide us? How can we provide that for ourselves and remember to be our
Okay.
own divine mother?
That's absolutely perfect. I love that. So to get to our last question, which is I ask this to everybody, and you'll see why. And I think I mentioned it, but you'll see why I think it's such a fun one to ask you. Is the story of Peter Pan has the Lost Boys in Neverland.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I always they get their pixie dust, and then they have a happy thought or something that fills them with joy, and that's what allows them to fly, I think, is the story. So I because every time I at the end of my notes, which I didn't even look at this whole time, I just have I have suggestion question mark Neverland question mark. So we've mentioned home a bunch of time,
Wow.
but the
Yeah.
reason I'm bringing this up is because your other song is Neverland, and so, um, but do you have something that hits you like your gut answer to that thing that if you were in Neverland, you're one of the lost boys and you need
Mhm.
that happy thought, what would it be?
I believe. I
Hmm.
mean, I think all magic is rooted in I believe.
Okay.
You know, it's like, and that's what's always kind of given me my magic, my magic fairy dust in life,
Right.
was from a very young age. I decided I'm going to believe,
Right.
and it was a choice. People said, "Oh, Santa Claus isn't real," and I said, "Yeah, I know," but I choose. I
Hmm.
actually choose because I like to believe, not from a
Right.
place of ignorance, but from a place of my choice. And that
Right.
has brought a lot of true and real magic into my life. So,
I really love that because it makes you just think it's like because you do. I mean, think about how fun the idea of Santa Claus was and how that made you feel all the time. And
yeah.
then we just decided that it was like, well, it's not true, so I don't get that feeling anymore. It's like what a waste. like just I mean, even at the times where I feel the most like disconnected from any of these sort of pursuits, if you want to call them pursuits, but um I will think, I'll be like, all right, well, what was it before? What was it like before? Was that working? Was the logic purely logical working? And I'm not saying don't
Mhm.
be skeptical and think about what you're doing and make sure it has some practical use. But at the same time, a lot of times I'll be like, no, the purely mind logical plane wasn't working either. That was leading me to that I just want to go home places. So why
Mhm.
not? Why not believe? You know what I mean?
And
Like,
why not both? You know, it's
right,
like we can always be, it's
hmm,
like they don't have to contradict one another.
right,
Truth is always
right,
a paradox, and just
right,
learn to hold all of it. And
right,
it's one doesn't need, we're always comparative, right? We're always comparing
right,
things. Oh, do I need
hmm,
logic or magic? And
hmm,
well, you need both.
right, right,
Life is going to be real drudgery if you've
yeah,
got no magic. And also, life's going to be really challenging if you have no logic and nothing that's rooting.
hmm,
But I invite people to find why magic is logical. I think
mm,
I don't believe
okay,
that they're separate things. I think there's
mm,
a lot of logic, and we talked about some of the logic of why it's logical to maybe
hmm,
live your life in magic rather than not if there's a choice.
right. Well, I appreciate you bringing the non-dualistic viewpoint and back in at the end, since the podcast is called Everyone is Everything.
Mhm.
So it's very easy to slip into the multiple choice of it, like it's this, or this. You don't get to, but I guess it's all the above. That answer is always, I wish I could just go back to all the tests I've ever taken and fill in all the
Yeah.
above for every answer and be like, nope, I'm right. But anyway, thank you for doing
Yeah.
this. I think you should
Thanks for
do,
having me.
yeah, you should do lots of podcasts. You should keep telling stories and just listen to that pulled you to this one, because
Mm.
I think a lot of people will benefit.
Mm.
So
Thank you for this invitation, and thank you for making this such a fun and easy
good,
conversation and joy and pleasure to
cool,
share and explore.
great. Well,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome, and I'll talk to you later.